The Albright Knot Overview. Gosh, I have not done one of these overview videos in ages. Let's get straight in. The Albright Knot will fail for three main reasons. Firstly, slipping, mainly due to the incorrect cinching method. Secondly, movement, with the remaining slack within the knot that can move. And thirdly, cutting in of the final wrap. The line at the rear end of the knot cuts into itself as it tries to cope with the brunt of the load as the line turns and goes back through the center. So we've seen how to tie it and how it performs in these three different line categories, but now we'll take an in-depth look at these three key failure points, and my hope is it'll give you a better understanding of how you can improve and tie your knots a lot better. Before we get stuck into these three subjects, I just want to explain how this knot actually works. The design of a correctly tied Albright knot gives it two areas to distribute the load within the knot. The first of which is the equal and opposite opposing forces between the front wraps and the rear wraps, where the rear wraps are only being held on by the opposite force you exert to the tag end when you were tying the knot. And the second area is this final wrap at the back of the knot, or the last wrap of the standing end main line against itself. So right, let's check out slipping. Mainly due to the incorrect method of cinching this knot, the knot slips when the front wraps are allowed to move over the front end of the loop. Tightening the tagging correctly with bars is a must. Please see our episode 12 of the world's strongest fishing knot to see exactly how to tighten braid variants for the Albright. If there's not enough of this torsional constricting force binding the front loops together, you'll notice the knot slip as the wraps on the rear of the knot connected to the standing end main line exerts a greater force than the front binding wraps, and the rear wraps forces all the front wraps over this loop, and you're done. Right, so movement number two. This is the remaining slack within the knot that is allowed to move. So it's a bit like a conversation at this point. The front of the knot says to the back end of the knot, "Hey chaps, we're good here. There's no chance in hell any of us are moving here at the front. Try something else." So there's the back of the knot. "Hey guys, those chaps at the front aren't budging. Any chance we could huddle in just a little bit closer?" Then one of the rear guys breaks ranks. "Hey, stop pushing so hard. Why'd you have to push so tight? Oi, that hurts. Stop cutting me." That's the end of that. All that movement at the back causes so much damage, and the knot fails because the braid either sliced through the leader line with the movement or cut itself up. And number three, cutting in on itself at the back of the knot. So let's use the soldier analogy again. You guys good at the front? Yep, we're good, got this. You guys good at the back? And in the middle? Yeah, we got this. Okay, Nigel, hold this piece of standing end and we'll hold you. And that's it. Nigel gets this circular twisting line coming back through his legs, and that's it, done. And there's half of Nigel left there because, well, he's cut to bits. So look, it's a bit like dominoes. Pack them in real tight against each other and you can't push them over. Stand them in a single file and they drop real easy, one after the other. Or pack them in real tight and push, and the last man at the back gets all the pressure. So let's just look at these three areas in our three line-to-line categories. Monofilament to monofilament. Let's just imagine two pieces of 100-pound monofilament with the diameter each of, say, 0.95 millimeters. Now, if we took just a single piece of line and wrap it once around another piece of line and try to bind that into the fixed line, it's just not going to happen. The mono just ends up elongating and stretching out. So, if you now think of the Albright knot with 10 of these wraps of monofilament around each other, it will be near on impossible to expect all those 10 wraps to cut or bind into the center monofilament lines. So this then leaves the knot in a semi-fluid state. Apply the pressure and the line moves as there's 10 wraps of line to stretch out. So the stretchy monofilament just stretches even more, creating even more movement. So hey presto, movement directly translates to failure, as this allows the rubbing within the knot, all culminating at the back end of the knot. All this movement ends up being concentrated at Nigel's end, and he has to cope with all the line rubbing over himself and then back through the middle. Look, don't matter what underpants Nigel's wearing, that knot's going to get done. Right, monofilament to braid. This is where the knot really does shine. Right, so the leader material is soft on the mono, and the braid has all these hundreds of minute little filaments of line, each with its own little knife edge. So again, let's look at a single wrap of braid line around a piece of monofilament. If you pull the braid line hard enough with bars, you'll see the braid actually cuts into the line, and in fact it will slice straight through the line with no problem whatsoever. Also, if you compare the diameters of the line, the braid is about 0.5 millimeters compared to the 1 millimeter if we're looking back at the monofilament example. So it's a lot smaller. If we look at the Albright knot and assume we have tightened it the same way as I showed you in the World's Strongest Knot video, it will allow the braid to bind in evenly in the monofilament line and actually become an amalgamated massive knot. It binds in so easily and really forms a tight, compact unit. The break on these knots is in exactly the same place every time the braid snaps out in the back of the knot, leaving the Albright knot intact and leaving it attached to the mono leader. Nigel certainly is getting the brunt of the action at the back of the knot. Poor old bloke. Fluorocarbon to braid. Well, this is an interesting combination. Now, just a reminder about the design of the Albright knot. It's basically very different in design to almost every knot out there, bar a few. In fact, the only real knot bit crossing of lines occurs at the very end of the knot, where Nigel ends up turning back on himself. Its entire strategy for success relies on the knot wraps biting into the two other lines along their length. So here we have fluorocarbon with this fluoride impregnated line, giving it the hardness, making it tough with a high density and impervious to abrasion when compared to monofilament. Right, so bearing this in mind, if you now imagine a single piece of fluoro and a single braid line wrapped around it, you will notice the braid struggle will actually find the task near on impossible for it to bind into the fluoride. Let me just show you here on this tensile tester. These are 3 Albright knots, 80 pound fluoro to 80 pound braid. Just one test per knot. The first sample is hand tightened, the second sample is tightened with the bar, and the third sample is with the bar, but pulling it as hard as I can. So let's look at the failure on these 3 samples. Right, so you're probably all wondering, how's he going to sum up why the fluoro results were that bad in the World's Strongest Knot testing? In essence, you need to transfer the loading of the 15 wraps of braid to the 2 inner strands of the leader material with as minimal damage as possible. This will help protect these mating and overlapping lines. So on fluorocarbon to braid, due to the hardness of the line, it will struggle to evenly distribute the load of the 15 wraps of braid to the load of the 2 leader strands. There will be inconsistencies in the torsional constricting wraps, where it may be tighter at the front or tighter at the rear. Also, the hardness of the fluoro also allows for any slack in the braid line to move, whereas in the mono to braid, it's the complete opposite. There's an even distribution of load over the wraps and the mono. It's a lot softer and allows the braid to really bind in, hence less movement. So that's the Albright overview. I hope this has given you some insight into the inner workings of this all-time old knot. If I were to rate this knot based on all 3 line categories, I'd certainly give it an 8 out of 10. Possibly a 9 for mono to braid, especially for those really thin lines. Take care and thanks for watching. I do like to talk about these knots and all the things I've seen and learned while looking under the hood of these knots from all over the world. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your ongoing support. It's really appreciated. Oh, and I do love the comments, so keep them coming. It's great talking to you guys about this passion for fishing we all share. I'm Warren, and thanks for watching Toit Fishing. Until next time, see you guys and girls. Stay tight and stay toit. See you, man. See you, man.